Well, that went pretty much exactly as I'd anticipated. So a couple of days ago, I put out a song called What is the Point of Jeremy Corbyn? I knew that there was going to be a bit of a shitstorm in response, and there was indeed a bit of a shitstorm in response. As some of you noticed, rather mischievously, I only retweeted the negative tweets that I got back as a result of the song. There is a theory that internet virality is fueled far more by negative responses than by positive responses. And I think there's an element of truth in this. Certainly the most popular clips of Mark Kermode's film reviews are not him rhapsodising about Blade Runner 2049, but him losing his shit over Sex and the City 2 and Entourage. So I thought, I wonder if rather than retweeting the praise, which in and of itself can sometimes feel a bit tacky, what if I just retweet the angry ones? And is that going to attract more attention to the video as people see all this response and go, what's making these guys so angry? Rather than retweet the praise and have people think, oh, that looks good. And yeah, maybe it worked. But it was also quite interesting studying the nature of the negative response. Jeremy Corbyn fans hate being called a cult, but they do behave rather like cult members. I couldn't help but notice that the vast majority of the negative responses to the video did not take the form of any kind of refutation of any of the points I was trying to make in the song, or indeed even of just a general defence of Corbyn himself, but rather they took the form of intensely personal attacks on me. Sometimes quite vicious, actually. And here's the thing, I coined the term Corbynologist as a joke, but there were at least 2 or 3 tweets that I got that accused me of not being allowed near my kids anymore. Now that's literally what the Scientologists do. If you go up against a Scientologist, you can be declared an SP, a suppressive person, and declared fair game, and any and all attacks on your character become allowable. And the thing that they tend to go for is they call you a child molester. So that's literally a Scientology manoeuvre. So I found that quite telling. And of course there were plenty of the sort of the whataboutery kind of objections like, well, why aren't you singing about Theresa May? Why aren't you singing about the Tories? Yeah, I do. I sing about Theresa May and the Tories all the time, and I'm always writing about them in the paper, and I'm always ranting about them on here. But you know what? Here's the thing. Brexit is just the Tories doing Tory shit. Okay? This is the kind of shit the Tories are always doing. Whipping up a bit of cheap xenophobia to bolster their electoral prospects. Cheerfully abandoning the ordinary people of the country to suffer poverty and indignity just to get a decent chunk of deregulation and get a fast buck. That's just what we expect from the Tories. This isn't what we expect from Labour. Abandoning the poor and ordinary people of the country to suffer decades of indignity in the pursuit of some great purgative exercise in ideological purity. That's not what we expect from the Labour Party. That's what we expect from Pol Pot or Chairman Mao. I guess also I have a slightly different perspective from a lot of people in that I'm from Liverpool, and I was a teenager in Liverpool in the 1980s at about the time I was becoming politically aware, so I've actually seen the hard left in action, in power, up close, in a way that most people in this country really haven't. And it's pretty bloody scary, I've got to tell you, particularly if for one reason or another you find that you've ended up on their enemies list. But that's a video for another time, I think. But that was, I suppose, the principal bee in my bonnet which led me to compose the song. If you have an event on the horizon which is coming, which by any objective measure is going to heap suffering and indignity on the poor and disadvantaged people of this country, and you are the leader of the Labour Party, and you are not working 24 hours a day exploring any and all means, both legal and otherwise, to prevent this from happening, then seriously, what the hell are you for? Well, what purpose do you serve? What is the point of you? But I also made the decision that I wasn't going to engage with any of the haters with a Z, okay? I was just going to retweet them and then basically mute them. Always mute, don't block, don't block. They can see when you've blocked and they chalk it up as a little moral victory. Just mute, it's far more satisfying. I do like to imagine them howling impotently at me in the void as I just merrily go about my way. But today I changed my mind and I did address one. As one gentleman said, well, maybe you'd see the point of Jeremy Corbyn if you weren't financially comfortable. Oh, that's interesting. So I replied to him and said, what makes you think I'm financially comfortable? Now, it's not so much that I'm disputing that I'm financially comfortable. I mean, it depends on what you mean by comfortable. I mean, I'm getting by. I'm not under any immediate threat of homelessness. I'm not going to food banks, although things are pretty tight just at the moment. Not that it's any of your damn business, Mr. Financially Comfortable, but as it happens, I've got about 70 quid in the bank right now. But this actually turned out to be a bit of a recurring theme. I had some people saying, oh, it's very easy of you to say that in your plush recording studio, surrounded by your expensive equipment. Well, if you mean my shed, yeah, I guess it is. And as regards expensive recording equipment, I was recording it on my phone. as indeed I am recording this on my phone. But this conversation threw up two equally interesting and irritating points which seem to come round a lot. First of all, this idea that if you've heard of somebody, they're obviously rich. This is not necessarily the case. The words rich and famous are so closely associated that we've started to think of them as interchangeable concepts. Like, if you're rich, you're obviously famous, and if you're famous, well, you must be rich. And of course, neither of these is true. Really rich people are not famous. Really rich people tend to put quite a lot of effort into not being famous. This is how you know Donald Trump is not a real billionaire. Real billionaires don't host game shows. But by the same token, it's never been the case that being famous necessarily means you're wealthy. And these days, more than ever, you can actually be pretty damn famous these days and not making a bean out of anything. I've never really made any money at this job. I mean, I've got by, can't complain, I've done all right, and I don't complain because by and large I enjoy most of what I do, which if anything is far more valuable than money. That sounds like a weirdly hippie-ish thing to say, but seriously, what's the point in making, millions of pounds a year if you want to cut your own throat every Monday morning? Part of the trouble is that a comedian's income only ever becomes newsworthy at the absolute opposite end of the scale. It's like when it comes to like that Jimmy Carr was squirreling away millions of pounds in that tax avoidance scheme, or when Michael McIntyre got mugged and had his Rolex nicked. The people read those stories and go, wow, comedians make a lot of money. No, those comedians make a lot of money. The rest of us are all still nickel and diming it. That's like reading a story about how much money Bono's got and thinking, wow, musicians make a lot of money. But then there's the other side of the conversation, which is somehow the idea that if you are in anything other than dire financial straits, somehow this instantly disqualifies all your opinions. I've never really understood how this is supposed to work, and also I can't help but notice that it's applied very unevenly. Almost nobody uses that argument against somebody on their own side. I grew up in like this little sort of end of terrace semi-detached house in one of the quieter bits of Liverpool, didn't have a garden, did okay, never really wanted for anything, but Jeremy Corbyn grew up in a 17th century manor house called Yew Tree Manor in Shropshire. Now, does that disqualify him from having any kind of opinion on social issues? And moreover, Jeremy Corbyn's, I guess, role model and the patron saint of the British left is, of course, weirdly, my namesake Tony Benn. Tony Benn was not born Tony Benn, he was born the Honourable Anthony Wedgwood Benn, the second Viscount of Stansgate. And he actually had to renounce his peerage in order to carry on being an MP, because you're not allowed to be in the House of Commons if you're not common. And Tony Benn, especially since he died, has become this gleaming icon of ideological purity for the British left wing. And he was properly posh. I don't happen to think that somebody's upbringing does qualify or disqualify their opinions. You could argue that they bring less personal experience to bear, and that's certainly true. But also, it doesn't do to assume too much about somebody's background just because, I don't know, you've seen them on the telly once or heard them on the radio a couple of times. In the meantime, thank you to everybody who said nice things about the song. It was about 50-50 good and bad response in the end. And also a big hello to the new Patreon patrons I appear to have acquired as a direct result of it. Thank you so much for coming on board. I shall endeavour to be good company now you're here. Okay, see you soon.
This video was made possible by the supporters of my Patreon project, who help me make fun things while receiving great perks and rewards. If you enjoyed it, why not follow the link and join us?